no, let me backtrack a little bit. Um, Several weeks ago, the board received a building condition survey, and the building condition survey indicated a variety of concerns. It's no surprise to anyone that there are concerns throughout the district. And
Dr. Chase, I'm sorry, can I interrupt you real quick? I'm calling the meeting to order at 6:04. All right, sorry, Dr. Chase, thank you, please continue.
So the building condition survey indicated just where we are in terms of the health of our school buildings. Since COVID-19, we received several guidance on how we should open school. And some of the guidance areas are a bit troubling as it relates to the health of our schools. Mary O'Neill reached out to BBS to ask BBS to please give us an analysis of where we are and what we should consider in terms of what will make our schools safe. I'm committed to making sure that our schools open safely if they should open, and we're happy that BBS is here to share with us what we will need to be compliant to the new mandates. And I'm hoping that BBS will also make clear to the community so that they're not confused that children were not in dangerous buildings prior to, but there are new compliances that need to be addressed before we can safely open our buildings. I had a conversation this morning with New York State Education Department, the Commissioner's Office, as well as Board Regents today. And it was a very fruitful conversation. And, you know, I also sought clarification from them as well. And by the way, while I do have the floor, I just want to give a shout out to the task force committee. You got kudos from New York State Education Department for the work that we're doing in planning and how we brought the community together. But if I'm going to give the meeting over to Mr. Sieber, and he can explain to the board what needs to be done. And just know that, Mr. Sieber, your conversation with Mary O'Neill was memorialized and it was sent to the board last Friday.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me, kind of. I just want to go over some just general guidelines that are out there in place from the governor's office, from the CDC, from the health department, from the state education department on what all schools should be doing as far as getting their buildings ready for reoccupancy. So, the first bulleted item, and I think you guys might have seen this as part of my latest email, is to make sure all of your systems are operating properly. And that's something that I've been working with Michael Falcone on to try and get some of your systems operating that haven't been operating properly, that we noticed or were brought to our attention during our walkthroughs. So that's the first thing that we're asking the district to do. And that is underway now. He's been working on that for probably 3 weeks now in order to make that happen. And we'll continue to work on that. Next thing that everyone talks about is increasing ventilation rates. And that's something else I've been talking to him about. And the whole point is we want to ventilate these buildings. We want to over-ventilate these buildings so we flush the air out of there and we bring in more outdoor air. And there are a number of different ways, and I'll go through some of that with you. But again, I have had another conversation with Michael, in fact, later on this afternoon, to try and figure out how to do that with your controls contractor, with your staff. So he is working on that as well. A big recommendation is to try and increase the amount of outdoor air to 100% or up to 100%. And that is, again, to purge the buildings, to bring in more outdoor air so that you don't have the stale air in there. It's not an easy thing to do sometimes because, as you can imagine, when it's 85 degrees outside and you're bringing in 100% outdoor air, those spaces could get a little bit overheated. So that's going to have to be weather dependent. So that's something that the district is going to have to keep an eye on, but that's something we want to do. We want to bring in more fresh air. That's what everyone is recommending at this point. Exhaust fans, same thing. We want to make sure your exhaust fans are all running properly and are running for longer periods of time. Again, we want to put the building under negative pressure, under negative air. That way it will encourage that building to draw in more outdoor air and make the indoor air environment more healthy. And that's what the CDC is talking about, the health department. It's all about dilution. We want to bring in as much fresh air as we can. Opening windows is another way to do that. And I know some people say, well, what do you mean? You want me to turn the window air conditioner on and then open the windows? In some of your classrooms, and we'll talk about that a little bit more specifically, those classrooms were designed with natural ventilation. So they don't have a means of mechanical fresh air. They don't have a unit ventilator or an H&V unit that brings in fresh air mechanically. What they were designed with was natural ventilation and an exhaust system, or in some cases just natural ventilation because you have some older portions of your buildings. And what I mean by natural ventilation is operable windows. And that's something that your older buildings were designed with. That's how the building was designed. It met code at the time the building was built. And it's considered pre-existing non-conforming, grandfathered in. And that's what you have. And there's nothing wrong with that. So that's another thing that we're going to recommend is that, you open windows when it's safe and healthy to do so. And the state had put guidelines out and talked about, when it was healthy. Obviously, if there are, insects coming in, somebody has allergies, it's too hot, it's raining, there are issues, you're not going to do that. But when the outside climate is right and it's safe and healthy to do so, we recommend that you open windows in those buildings. And I'll get more specific on which buildings they are in a second. Filtration, I started to talk to Michael about that too. The New York State Health Department, New York State Education Department recommend that you put MERV 13 filters or the best MERV rated filter that you can put in all of your units. So the reason I say that, and the reason that the recommendation reads that way, is that on a unit ventilator, you only have about a 1-inch wide space for a filter slot, filter bank, filter track. So you can't put a MERV 13 filter in there, most likely. So what the guideline says is then you should put the highest rated MERV filter you can in that unit ventilator. So that might be a MERV 7, a MERV 8, MERV 6. It depends upon the specific unit ventilator. H&V units or rooftop units are different. They have a wider track. So you can probably fit a MERV 13 filter in those units. So again, that's something else that we're recommending and something else the health department is recommending. Another thing that I talked about in the email was purchasing and installing portable air cleaners. And what that's talking about is a little standalone device that you can wheel in, put it in the classroom. It has a HEPA filter on it, which is a very high efficiency filter. I think those units are going to be very, very difficult to obtain right now because I think a lot of people are looking to purchase them. So I think that might be the next toilet paper where it's very, very difficult for you to get any of those. But it is a recommendation if you can find them and you can make that happen. It's interesting. People have asked whether it's better to shut off the HVAC systems. And the answer is no. People said, well, that way I'm not spreading it around the building, but actually then you're not diluting the air. You're not bringing in any fresh air if you do it that way. So all of the experts and all the guidelines that have come down have said, do not do that. Do not shut off your systems. Make sure that they're operating. Make sure that they're bringing in as much fresh air as you can. Again, so those are really the general guidelines that the state has put out and that the health department have put out for all schools in trying to reopen. So that's what we're aiming for here. So now what I'm going to do is get more specific into your particular buildings. So I'm going to take Highview first. And
okay, can I just ask a question before you go?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I'm just, you keep calling these guidelines. Are these actual requirements and mandates, or are they just simply guidelines? And is there some sort of way of gauging whether we are within, whether it's mandates or guidelines or whatever?
Oh, that's a good question. So it depends. The ones from the governor's office and from the state education department and from the health department are really mandates. But again, the mandates realize that in some instances you can do more than in other instances. So they can't tell you you have to bring in 100% outdoor air if you have a building that's an older building that relies on natural ventilation. So they recognize that. The guidelines that are out there are for places like ASHRAE, American Society of Heating, Refrigeration, Air Conditioning Engineers, and they put out a 20 or 25-page white paper in May that the health department, I think, used as the basis of writing their requirements, as did the state education department, as did the governor's office. So it's a combination of the two. There are guidelines, but then there are also mandates out there to increase ventilation to as much as you can. Again, they don't say 100%, but as much as you can.
Well, I mean, as much as you can, you could say, well, we can't. So I'm just saying, if there is some kind of an objective measure of the amount of ventilation, that is required versus acceptable versus, I mean, what if you just say we can't? I mean, I'm not saying that we're going to say that, but I'm just saying, what if you just say we can't?
Well, there are some buildings. Sorry, there are some buildings that are going to be more difficult than others in your district. And that's true of any school district. There's nowhere where you can't, but there are places where you can't bring in mechanical ventilation because the building wasn't designed that way. So you're going to have to open windows. That's going to be your natural ventilation, and that's how the building was designed. So it's going to differ from building to building, and to a certain extent from classroom to classroom within that building. So, that's what we really have to try and figure out and maximize as best we can. Yes.
Will there then be an unequal amount of air quality building the building? If you're saying some buildings just will not be able to get the same level of filtration or fresh air, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, there are going to be differences from classroom to classroom depending upon the system that's in that classroom. That is true. So if you have an older building or a building that was built that relied on natural ventilation or operable windows and an exhaust system, that's how you're going to have to bring in fresh air into those classrooms. That's how the fresh air delivery system was designed. Other rooms, you have unit ventilators, or you have units, rooftop units, that are designed to bring in mechanical fresh air. In those spaces, you're going to open those fresh air intake dampers up to 100%, and you're going to bring in as much air as you can. So it's going to be different from classroom to classroom, depending upon the types of systems that your buildings have.
How will we be able to measure the level of safety with the different types of filtration?
Well, as far as the filtration, like some of your rooms, the rooms with natural ventilation, you're not going to have any filtration in there. So you're going to rely on operable windows to bring in outdoor air. You don't really have to worry about the filtration there because you're not recycling or returning any of the air to the space.
How will we measure safety, the safety of the air quality?
Really, I mean, you could do air sampling if you wanted to do that. The way you're going to gauge safety is not technically measuring it, but you're going to gauge it by making sure that your systems are working properly and bringing in as much fresh air as they can. That's how you're going to make your buildings as safe as you can.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other general questions?
You can go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to get into Highview. I'll start with that building. It's the first one that was on my list. So Highview is one of the buildings that was designed with natural ventilation. So in Highview, in the classrooms, you have fin tube radiation and you have operable windows and an exhaust system. You do not have a unit ventilator. You do not have an air handling unit that's bringing in mechanical fresh air. You're relying on operable windows and exhaust fans to do that. So the way it was designed is that you would open the window and you would turn the exhaust fan on, and that exhaust fan would draw fresh air through the classroom and then would take the stale air up and out of the building. Again, that's the way it was designed. So we can't change that. That's the way the building was designed. It's considered pre-existing non-conforming. It wouldn't be allowed by today's code, but it's grandfathered in because that's how the building was designed originally. So the recommendations that we have for Highview is that in the OTPT room, when we went in there, there's a magic air unit in the storage area that feeds that room. that Magic Air unit was not running at the time of our inspection, and apparently does not run properly. I guess it needs work. So we're recommending that go in there, repair that unit. We're not recommending replacement. It's a relatively modern unit. I don't think it needs to be replaced, but you need to go in and troubleshoot that unit and figure out why it's not running. I don't know if there's a problem with the fan, could be a bad motor, it could be a bad bearing. I'm not really sure. But I brought this to Michael's attention so that he can get his guys in there and take a look at it. Yes.
What does OTPT stand for?
Occupational therapy, physical therapy.
Oh, exactly what it sounds like. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And that's what you guys call the room, OTPT. So we need to get that unit operational again so that it was designed to bring in fresh air. So we need to get that operational again so that it does bring in fresh air. Same thing with the gymnasium. So there is an air handling unit in the gym that feeds that space. Again, that unit was designed to bring in mechanical fresh air, but that unit is not running currently. I don't know why. I wasn't able to ascertain from looking at the unit. So what I've talked to Michael about is the unit is original and it needs to at some point be replaced. It is at the end of its useful life, but hopefully we can get that unit up and running temporarily and introducing fresh air into the gymnasium so that we ventilate that space properly. So that is something, again, that Michael's having his guys look at to try and get that unit up and running again. Next one is rooftop exhaust fans, and you'll see this at several of the buildings. And this is typical of pretty much every school district, that rooftop exhaust fans, you have hundreds of them throughout the district. And at any one given time, there are a number of fans that are not operational. And that's something that was reported to us as we walked around the buildings. We walked up on the roof. I could tell which fans are on, which fans are off. So this particular building, Highview, had 18 non-operational rooftop exhaust fans on it at the time. Again, some could be that the motor starter was turned off down below because it was shut off for service and nobody turned it back on. So there's no charge for you to turn the motor starter back on. Some could be that the belt broke and the guys just haven't gotten to it yet as a maintenance issue. Some could be that the motor went. So it really depends upon the fan. So really what Michael and his crew have to do, and they've already started to do this, is that they need to go in and start looking at each fan individually and figure out what's going on with that fan and get as many of these fans running as he can. Some might require replacement and can't be repaired.
Can I ask a question? And maybe it's not for you, it might be for Mr. Falcone, but I don't know why we have these maintenance things that it sounds like we're existing and we weren't taking care of them beforehand. And now we're in this crisis and it's become something that we must do. So this concerns me. Why were the fans left, that many, 18, undone? Like, why wasn't that brought to our attention? I'm sure it was in some survey somewhere, but why wasn't that, addressed?
I've been addressing, I'm sorry, can I say something? This is Michael Falcone.
Sure, Mr. Falcone.
How are you doing? Okay. The bearings have been changed at the gym in Highview School. I tried to tackle as much as possible on the budget that I have. And you all know what my budget is. You see what we're doing. So to try to replace everything at once, and I've said this before, you need capital projects to do everything at once, but little at a time. I've been fixing ventilator units, rooftop units. We replaced them, but there are C's. I know there's a few of them at Highview School that they're just everything C's on it and rusted out. They need to be replaced. No, things are getting done. The high school was really bad when I first started. I have units that are running, and I do have the fresh air open. So it's not like we're not doing anything. but we're talking about if you need to get everything done at once, that's a big project. That means a lot of money.
Mr. Falcone, I heard this man just say there were 18 fans in one school. So that does concern me greatly. I just wonder if there's any way to do like, and really this is hindsight because now we're in this crisis situation. We just got to figure it out. But wondering if there's any way to get like a yearly update of things like this that are, I mean, there's multiple things you always have to fix in a home. There's multiple things you always have to fix, but things to not forget about or bypass. I know it's also been complicated because as the facilities committee, we haven't been able to really meet like we used to every month since COVID happened. So I guess that's also playing into this, but this, okay. Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Miss Carey.
are we supposed to be voting on a $2 million,
2.5.
just give me a moment.
2.5.
Yeah, 1.1 point, I thought it says here two,
No, 2.5.
2.5.
2.5.
Huh?
Yes, 2.5. That's what Mr.
Now-
Seba is going through.
Okay, now I read through this, and it appears that all of the things that are supposed to be getting done adds up to this $2.5 million. So I'm kind of confused by what Mr. Falcone is saying.
Okay.
I'm kind of confused what you're saying. I mean, I've been fixing stuff, every year on ventilation. Okay. So
That's, Mr. Falcone, I'm asking a question of my president. Are we voting on a $2.5 million budget to fix these things that are outlined in this memo that we have here?
That is what was presented to us as a board, and we briefly touched upon it on our Saturday our Saturday meeting, which is why we postponed a full discussion so that we can meet with Mr. Seba so we can get more information and more understanding of the project as a whole, and also to be able to ask questions about costs as well.
Okay. All right, thank you.
All right, no problem. Terry?
Mike, the fan situation that you shared with us, was that in the building condition survey? Mike?
what was the unit, the gym unit, was that in the building condition survey?
May I jump in for a moment? This is Mary. Everything that I sent to you on for the Saturday meeting was listed specifically in the building condition survey and was provided by Mr. Seba. The actual total cost of all of those items was $2,470,000. I did say that it could come in less. We wanted to just ask for 2.5 in the event that something came up that we were unaware of. But we're hoping that everything, as mentioned Saturday, we're hoping that everything comes in less than what is projected.
Thank you, Mary.
So if it wasn't the building condition survey, in other words, this wasn't withheld from us in any way. Am I correct?
No, it was not.
Okay, thank you.
So it was my understanding when we were hired to be brought in as a fresh set of eyes, and that the board was interested in doing a project. And so we did the building condition survey early. You guys are not due for a couple of years to do that, but you asked us to get a head start on that, which we did, and we provided to the board. And the plan was to meet with you guys and sit and go through the BCS and then come up with a plan for a project.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, COVID happened.
Exactly.
And now we're kind of scrambling to play catch up here a little bit. And I think that's what's happened up until this point.
Thank you for clarifying, Mrs.
Thank you.
And let me, if I may, so that was the building condition survey that you guys did. I'm talking about a prior, because we didn't just start doing BCSs. Am I correct, Mary and Mike?
No, Terry, we haven't just started doing building
No.
condition surveys. They've been existing for a long time now.
Right, and these things that we're talking about today, those were in there. Am I correct, Mike?
Yes.
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 Sorry, you're
Well,
saying 18 fans have been broken
Excuse
for
me, I'm asking a
5
question
years?
of Mary and.
I don't think
Mike.
so. And Mr. Seba
Okay.
saying,
Excuse me,
I
excuse me.
agree.
No. So the items are in the current BCS, the one that we
Thank
just
you.
did.
I
But many of
understand
these
that. My
items were
question-
not in the previous BCS, which was done in 2015. They were not in there. They're in the new BCS though.
Thank you, Mr. Seba. I appreciate that. Can you continue with your going through the report with us?
Sure.
Ashley has his hand up.
I'm sorry, hold please. Ashley.
You're muted, Ashley.
You're not muted, but we still can't hear you. No. Okay. All right, Mr. Seba, keep going. Ashley's gonna try to fix his sound and come back in with his
Or
question.
chat it, yeah.
Okay. So the next item on Highview is just to make sure that the exhaust fans are running during occupied times. And again, I saw that in a couple of buildings. And this is very typical. You know, you go into a building and an exhaust fan's not running and you say to the custodian, why is the exhaust fan running? He says, well, the teacher asked me to shut it off because it gets drafty in the classroom. And then if the custodian doesn't remember to turn that fan back on, the fan's not operational. And so what we found is that in several of the spaces, exhaust fans were not running. That could run. They're operational. They just weren't running at the time of our inspection, which was during the school day. So they should have been there. So that item is just really telling the district, you need to run your fans when the kids are in the building, whenever the building is occupied. Again, we want to put that building under negative pressure so that we're drawing in outdoor air from the outside and making those buildings as healthy as we can. Okay, so the next building is Jackson. And
now?
I'm sorry.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, yes. All right,
Okay.
Ashley, go ahead with your question.
So, Mr. Seba, for the gym air handling unit and the OTPT unit, you previously mentioned having to replace the air filters where possible with MERV 7 or whatever you could fit. This price that we're seeing here, is that including changing out filters for those two units?
This pricing does not include changing out filters, but filters are a very minor cost as compared to this. This report was actually put together prior to the whole COVID thing and the requirement for MERV filtration. So that's not included in here, but that's something that Michael can do with the vendor that provides filters to the school district, have them come in, look at the units, and again, put MERV 13 or the best MERV rated filter that they can fit in those particular units.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so Jackson. Jackson has a very different type of a system. It has a dual duct system that has hot air and cold air that comes through ductwork under the floor. And then there's a mixing box that is governed by the thermostat in those rooms that tells it how much hot air, how much cold air in order to introduce into the room to maintain set point temperature. What we found is that when we went down into the fan room, there are a whole bunch of series of dampers down there. And those dampers are not functioning properly. And Mr. Falcone knew it at the time. He actually told me I was going to find that. It's something that he's been looking into and working on. But those dampers are just kind of chalked open by the head custodian. And the head custodian would tell me, well, when this area calls for heat, I go down here and I open this, I put this piece of wood in here and get them, more heat. And then when they're satisfied, I take it out. So the building is not operating automatically the way it was designed to operate. He's doing things manually, which is certainly not the best way to do it. The other thing I discovered is that the fresh air intake damper to bring in outside air, the damper linkage had been disconnected and the motor was not working properly. Again, I brought it to Mr. Falcone's attention when we did our walkthroughs, and that is something he is working on as well. So that's really a restoration of what you have. You do have a system that's able to bring in fresh air. It's just not really doing that right now, but it can. So we're recommending that that system be overhauled and fixed. It's not a tremendous amount of money that we have in there because, again, you have the equipment. It just needs to be lubricated. Damper motors need to be replaced. Linkages need to be reconnected, and everything needs to be re-energized so that it's working properly. Again, return air damper, same thing. That was chocked 100% open. So right now that building has 100% return air and no fresh air. So we need to fix that. We need to get that operational again before we bring the kids back into that building. Exhaust fans. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So I have another question. So you did say about Highview that it might have been the fans might have been turned off and forgotten to put back on or something because maybe it was too cold in the room at the time. How would we mitigate that situation in a COVID environment where we would need to leave the fans on? How would, or in Highview, or in this sense, you said the dampers were unplugged, were unlinked,
Disconnected, yes.
connected for some reason. We need to relink those. Is that there may be a reason why they were disconnected that may present itself again?
Well, I think what you're going to find is that type of a dual duct system, hot deck, cold deck, is tend to at times get slight overheating or underheating. And that's probably why the dampers got disconnected at some point, because enough people complained and then the custodian just started to do it manually, and it's just been done that way for the last several years, I guess. So now that we know that, we need to reinstitute what's there. We need to bring fresh air back in. Is it going to be perfect? We don't design dual duct systems anymore because they're not. We found that they are problematic in trying to contain the temperature and control the temperature in a classroom. So you might have some slight overheating and underheating that's going to occur in your classrooms again. I think you're experiencing that now anyway, which is why the custodian is doing things manually. But the problem is we're not bringing in any fresh air. So we need to get that fresh air operational again and make everything automatic the way it was originally designed to be controlled.
Okay. The reason why I'm asking is because I'm trying to figure out, do we put money to repair something that was undone for a reason because it wasn't, it was too cold or too hot or whatever. The reason was that these people disconnected the system. So I'm just thinking about how we would manage that. Okay.
No, that's a good question. So what we recommend, I mean, now we're saying we need to make this operate again because we need to bring in fresh air. Long term, what we recommended is that you put a direct digital control system, a DDC control system in there, so that we get much better control of those dampers so that we don't have the overheating and underheating issues that you currently have. So that'll be the ultimate fix. But in the meantime, we just need to get them operational again so that we start to introduce fresh air into that building.
Thank you.
Okay.
Point of clarification. So at least what I saw when I looked at the BCS and compared them to these items, these all seem to be subsets of what's in the BCS. So it looks like in terms of cost, you figured out what we had to do to get the current stuff running. But in long term, in a lot of cases, you recommend a lot of full equipment replacement, a lot of other stuff, but we're just not worrying about that today, correct?
That's correct. We want these systems up and running as best we can at this point, and then we're going to have to plan long term. The money that you see is long term planning in here. I think we can spend a lot less money right now, get these systems up and running prior to kids coming back in, and then we can go and do these long term planning projects and replace this equipment, because a lot of the equipment is original. It's past its useful life. Trying to get it running again by September when the kids come back, if and when the kids come back. But then the long-term goal is you need to replace that equipment. because it's just done.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Let's see, next building that I had on my list was Bailey. So Bailey is another one that was designed with operable windows and an exhaust system. So it does not have mechanical means of fresh air introduction into the building. It has cast iron radiators. In the older portion of that building, it has baseboard radiation, and it has operable windows and an exhaust system. So the problem is that we see in that building is that the exhaust system is not functioning properly in that building either. So we need to get that building functioning properly in exhaust systems. There have been grills that have been covered over in that building. There are grills that apparently there was a hung ceiling installed, and the grills were never brought down from the ceiling above down into the hung ceiling when the hung ceiling got installed. So we need to reinstitute this exhaust air system because that's your means of fresh air, operable windows and exhaust, and the exhaust is not functioning properly. So that's really the big issue that we have in Bailey. That's the fourth item, I think, on there. Reopen, replace, restore the building exhaust system to restore proper operation. There's a couple of exhaust fans up in the attic. The exhaust fans, one sounds like I tried to turn it on. It runs for a very short period of time and then shuts off. It trips the relay in the fan. So it seems like there's something wrong with the fan motor there. I'm not sure what the deal is with the other one up there, but we need to get those fans running and then we need to reopen the grills. And I'm sure what happened was when you have those grills, sometimes when the fans are off, cold air comes back down through those grills and people complain and they say, hey, can you cover that over? And some of these covers have been on there for an extended period of time. They don't look like they're new. They've been there for a while. So we need to reinstitute that system. We need to get that thing back up and running again because that's what we're going to rely on for your ventilation in there, opening the windows and turning that exhaust system back on.
So, Mr. Seba, this sounds like this is a combination of a lot of repairs, better maintenance of it, and better, I say procedures as in, it shouldn't be commonplace that somebody could just ask, can you keep the grills closed? Like it has to be, I guess, a bit of education of how maintaining these systems for a long-term period has to take place. So, like I'm cold all the time. So if I was a teacher in a classroom, I probably would be calling, hey, can you please, it's too cold in here. So the education will probably need to be put in place to say, hey, it's cold, but I know I can't really ask for certain adjustments because it will have an ill effect on the system as a whole.
So you guys are playing catch up a little bit here. And I think that's what we're seeing. And it's been exacerbated by the whole COVID thing. And this is typical of many school districts. Don't feel like when we do these BCSs that you're the only one that we found these types of items. This is very, very typical. All of these things are typical that we see. And again, that's what the board was planning on doing. It just, we've now compressed our time frame dramatically because of the whole COVID thing and trying to get the kids back in the building in September. So I think that's kind of what you're seeing and experiencing here.
David?
You just mentioned the time factor. You keep talking about building opening. Are you thinking that if we approve this, we're on track to possibly get all this done by the opening of school?
That is the hope and the game plan here. It'll depend upon who you're able to bring in, how much Michael and his staff are able to do. But yes, I mean, we're hoping to get this work done, and most of it's just repair work. A lot of it's troubleshooting work. So, they might open a fan up and say, well, this fan's just done. We can't repair it. We have to replace it. So that's really the game plan here. That's what we're working towards. Yes.
So unless you run out of parts, you think you can do it. Okay, good.
So there are a couple of air handling units in that building in Bailey. One is up in the attic, and it handles the older portion of the building. It was reported when we were there that the person that was walking us around felt that that unit hadn't run in many, many years. It is original to that portion of the building. Again, some of the grills have been covered over. So we're going to have to, that unit, I don't know if you're going to be able to make that thing work again. We're going to have to see if we can get that unit back and operational. Again, I don't know why it was decommissioned or taken out of service. It could just be a bad motor for all I know. I'm not really sure, but we're going to have to make the fan work again. We're going to have to make sure that the coil works again, and we're going to have to make sure the controls work again so that we start to bring in outdoor air and pump it in the building. And the same thing goes with the auditorium H&B unit in there too. We were told it does not work. When you look at the unit, it looks like it doesn't work. It looks like it hasn't worked in several years. So again, we need to make that unit functional and bring in outdoor air again, once again, to that space.
Are there any roof leak overlap problems?
No. You mean as far as creating these issues with the units?
I mean, like there's not a place with a leak that's corroded any portion of the system.
No, that's
Good.
not the reason
Thanks.
that they were
Thanks.
shut off.
Good.
Okay, so that's it for Bailey. I'm going to jump to the middle school, high school. So that building has another different type of system. It has air handlers in it that bring in fresh air and distribute it around the building. What happened was, and I don't know when this got done, but it was probably done for energy efficiency, fuel savings, but the fresh air intake dampers on those units are disconnected and they're closed, so that those units are not bringing in fresh air right now. I know Michael has already started to buy cases of WD-40 and try and spray it on there and get these dampers operational again. Put in new damper motors so that these dampers stroke open and close according to the control system. Again, the parts are there, the units are there, the fans work, and they recirculate air. They're just not introducing fresh air at this point. So some of them are frozen shut, damper motors are missing, linkages are disconnected. So that's something that he's working on right now. Again, we have a number of exhaust fans in this building that are reportedly not functional. There are 15 fans total, only 4 of them reportedly working currently. So again, Mr. Falcone is working on that with his staff right now to try and get these fans back and operational again. Then there were a couple of rooms where the space is fed by a unit. So the overall space is okay, it's getting fresh air, but what they did was they subdivided the space, and some of those rooms don't have registers in them. So some of those rooms are not getting fresh air currently. So there are 6 rooms right now. So what we're recommending is that the district bring in a mechanical contractor, just tap the ductwork in the other areas and extend it into those rooms so that those rooms will now be getting heat, cooling, and fresh air in them.
Is that just the office space on the 3rd floor, or
Yes.
are there rooms adjoining it that also have problems? Is it just that area?
Just that area, yeah. The rooms adjoining it were okay, but when it got subdivided, nobody just tapped the duct and put a register in these new locations. So that has to be taken care of. As far as other buildings, I mean, you have the ECP, that's from 1907, as is the Teacher Center. Those buildings were designed with natural ventilation only, operable windows. There is no exhaust system in there. There is no mechanical fresh air intake system in there. So the recommendation at those buildings is we need to open the windows. We need to get some ventilation in there and operate the building the way it was originally intended to operate. So you don't have a system you can turn on. There's no system we can fix. You just really need to make sure that those windows are open so that we're bringing in fresh air the way that building was originally designed. Same with the transportation garage. There were not any issues that were identified in there regarding fresh air at this point. So that's really kind of a summary. Again, there are long-term goals and there are short-term goals. The long-term goals is the 2.5 million that we're talking about here. The short-term goal is let's get everything fixed and operational so we can bring the kids back in temporarily, and then let's plan for replacement of these units to make sure that they go back into a life cycle and work properly for the next 30 or 40 years.
Mr. Seba, what is the cost for the short-term goal? Because the long-term goal is the 2.5 mil. What's the cost of the short-term goal?
I can't really put a price tag on that because I don't know what you're going to find when you open, say, an exhaust fan up. You might find that the motor's burned out, you go spend $100, you put a new motor in and it's done. You might find that the fan is completely shot and fried inside and you have to replace. So the cost could really vary by a lot. But I think all of this equipment can be repaired and made operational again. So I don't think we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. I think we're talking about tens of thousands of dollars in order to make that happen. But it's very, very hard for me to really estimate that because I just don't know why some of these units were shut off and why some of these units are not working currently.
Okay, thank you.
Antoinette?
Sorry. I'm sorry. Thank you, Tanya.
Yes.
So
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. When you said my name, I actually thought I was off of mute and I wasn't. Mr. Seba, you said that all could be repaired and operational again. Is that statement tied to the 2.5 million? And what do you, when you say that, because you also said that you could start to fix something and then something else could not be working within whatever you're fixing, and then you're sort of like back at square one again. So I guess, I know you say long-term, short-term, I guess, what is your thought of us handling this in this time frame by September?
Well, again, it's tough to predict that because I don't know what's wrong with each piece of equipment. So there's a lot of forensics that has to happen here. People have to take things apart. They have to figure out why it doesn't work. If it's just a bad bearing, that's an easy thing to do. Go down, order a new bearing, pick up the new bearing, put it in, and make the unit operational again. There's going to be a lot of controls work that's going to need to be done on your dampers, your damper linkages, reconnecting all of that. So you're definitely going to need to bring in a controls contractor and have them do a lot of that work. Maybe ask for help from local mechanical contractor if Michael and his staff can't handle all of this. But again, it's hard because it's troubleshooting something that doesn't work, but we don't know why it doesn't work. There's nobody there that's able to say, well, there's a bad motor on that fan, or the belt broke, or there was a short in the wiring or whatever. So I just know that they're not working. I just don't know why. So that's the hard part. That takes a little bit of time to really chase that down and try and figure that out.
Thank you. Tanya?
So, well, I had a question. Again, this kind of harks back to, I'm really trying to understand what it is that, I understand that in an ideal world, we would just get all of this done. But because of the cost and the fact that we have other priorities as well, and that we are currently limited in the amount of money that we have for capital projects, I'm trying to understand what the actual state requirements are. And also, I'd like to know if we're going to get any state money to do this kind of stuff, if there is a state requirement, or if it just has to come out of, all of it is supposed to come out of our budget.
So the phase one work that I'm recommending, sorry. The phase one work that I'm recommending is all considered repair. That is not something that would be aidable from the state. It's not considered a capital project. It's considered normal routine maintenance and repair. So getting these systems back and operational again would not be aidable. However, the replacement of these systems, if that's what you so choose to do, that would be aidable. So you would be at your building aid ratio. So I don't know if that answers your question, but again, phase one, not aidable. That money would have to come out of operating budget, repair reserve, Michael's line item, whatever. I'm not sure. The other work would come out of your capital and would be long-term planning, So that answer your question?
Well, sort of. I mean, I guess I don't know then how much we could expect from the state if we were to do some of this capital improvement rather than repair. I mean, that's one of the issues that we have is that.
I think your building aid ratio is relatively low.
Yeah.
So I think you're in the 10 or 15% range on your building aid. So you would expect to get 10 or 15% back on every dollar that you spend for a capital project that qualifies.
We are at 10%. And the recommendation that was made on Saturday was based off of the 5-year plan and the based off of the 5 plan and an email from Mr. Seba. As mentioned before, Mr. Falcone is attempting to fix the items, but we don't know if that's possible. And what I will do is I will forward the board the email so you can see that for yourselves.
So can I ask a question? This memo states that there was going to be a withdrawal of all of the summer projects, and that with the exception of the cleaning, ductwork at Lee F. Jackson, Highview, and Woodlands Middle High School for just under $40,000. Is that what we're going to be voting on tonight, $40,000?
No, we had provided you with a list of summer projects that between the buildings that the buildings had requested. We had put that, given that to the board. We have pulled everything that the buildings have requested, and the only thing we want to move forward with is the cleaning of the vents of the ductwork at the different buildings. Because to me, to us, that's health and safety for the kids and the faculty. The funding for this project, if approved, would come from funds that the district currently has already set aside.
Okay, so just help me to understand why we're still looking at $2.5 million.
The $2.5 million came from an email that Mr. Seba had sent me, which I will forward directly to the board. When with COVID, we started and there are new regulations, we started looking at the building condition survey, and then reached out to Mr. Seba. When I actually looked at the 5-year plan, I can tell you the costs associated with the 5-year plan in year 1 for the ventilation was substantially more than what we're asking for. We sent that list off to the architects, and they came back to us with the just under 2.5 million of what should be done. And I will forward that email directly to you. Okay, now my last question is this. If we did all of the things that are outlined on this memo in all of the schools, as he outlined it, as Mr. Seba outlined, would that be covered under this $2.5 million? Yes. So everything that was outlined in that memo that I sent to, that was given to you, comes directly from the architects and comes directly from your building condition survey and your 5-year plan. While we hope that it does not come in that high, We're hoping that it comes in less. And we anticipate that it does, but because the dollar amount that was provided to me was just under $2.5 million, that's why I gave you that recommendation.
Okay, so I have to, I need to clear this up one more time. So at one point you said, Mr. Seba, that the 2.5 million was the long term. Am I correct?
Yes.
So what is there? Is there a short-term cost? 'Cause you also said there is a short-term also.
So the short-term cost is really going to be the repair of these systems to get them up and running again. And again, there's no way I can really even guesstimate that because I just don't know what's wrong.
Okay, so you're not sure about the cost for short-term. Okay.
Correct.
All right, David, I saw your hand and
Okay, I think I'm going over the same thing you were. So if I go and look at the building condition survey that we got in May, and I look, there's a report for each school. And one of them is Woodlands. And for Woodlands, item 88, ventilation system, exhaust fans, etc. They've got a price tag on that. Cost to reconstruct, replace just Woodlands is $3.4 million, $3,410,000, right? So we know that in the building condition survey as a whole, that there's a bigger long-term total than 2.5, because if one school alone has more than 2.5, there's an estimate for really long-term fixes that's going to exceed 2.5. Okay, so there's got to be a longer term than just the 2.5. So are we looking at like 3 different tiers here? One is what we need to do over 5 years, and one is what we need to do in a year, and then one is what we need to do by school opening. Is that what's happening?
Well, if you're asking me, Mr. Warner, I looked at the 5-year plan and I looked at items that were recommended in year 1, and they totaled over $12 million, about $12 million based on the ventilation issues. I reached out to our architects to say, what do we need to do? They went back and looked through the 5-year plan and provided that list. So you are talking about a multi-year approach. And at some point, the district will have to do a capital project because there is no way that you're going to be able to fix everything that needs to be fixed within your current budget.
Okay, but what I'm hearing is if all goes well, if we approve this 2.5 million, that's a ceiling. We may not come anywhere near that if things can be repaired instead of replaced, at least in the very short term.
You
so
might
we may
not.
be looking at some money that we may be able to use for other things if we have to in the short run, or come back and say whether we want to keep it with air quality.
Well,
Possibly.
what we're asking for is up to 2.5 million to fix up to 2.5 million. Clearly, if we can come in less, we will.
Okay.
But once we get going, you don't know, as Mr. Seba mentioned, you don't know what's going to happen when you start pulling things apart. It might be an easier fix than everyone thought. It could be much more difficult. We just don't know that. So we're basing our request on the architect's estimates.
Okay.
I had another question, which was
Tanya, hold on for 1 second.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, I couldn't unclick in time, but Ashley had his hand up, and then you are next.
Yeah, thank you. So, Mr. Seba, if I heard you correctly, you said that you suspect, and obviously suspect because you can't prove it, that most of the repairs that we would need to do now in the short term would be less than hundreds of thousands of dollars, right?
Yes.
So is it reasonable to extract from that statement that instead of approving 2.5 million, if we approve, let's say 200,000, that should theoretically cover us to get these repairs immediately actioned and completed in time for the school opening?
It will take care of the repair portion of it, but the fact remains that much of that equipment is going to need to be replaced at some point as well.
And if we replace that equipment now, would that be done in time for school opening?
No, which
Okay,
is why it's a multiple tiered approach here.
Got it. So I guess my thought process, and the reason I was asking the question is, as you've already heard, obviously budget's a concern. Would it make sense, since we're doing a short-term plan anyways, just to get us working, to approve a smaller than $2.5 million amount? Let's say, as an example, 200,000. We can plug in the right number and fine-tune that, just to get us up and running for the beginning of the school. And then knowing already now that we're going to need a phase two, which will need to include replacement of equipment, that'll be much more of a cost. And then at some point, to Mary's point, we'll have to tackle the whole behemoth of the 12 million or whatever it is. Is that accurate?
Yes. I mean, again, it's hard for me to pinpoint the 200,000 or 300,000 or 100,000 just because I don't know exactly what's going on there. So I'm afraid to guess and guess low, but yes, that's something that you could do, approve a certain amount of money. Let's repair these systems, get them working again. And then we can start to plan for the overall replacement of them and come back and talk to the board and then reallocate additional monies towards that at that point.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Tanya, then Tracy.
So actually, another question I had regarding the sort of the longer term plan is that I see that a lot of these systems have to be installed on the roof. And it's my understanding that we actually have to repair the roofs. So I'm just wondering if, we should first repair the roofs before we actually install the new systems. So I guess I'm on the same page with Ashley that since this can't be done before the beginning of the school year, we do the best that we can to fix what things up and running, but then we really do things correctly. It's like in a house, you're not going to put on, I don't know, solar panels unless you first fix your roof or something like that,
I think that's a good point. There's obviously a sequence that you want to follow. I think, though, that most of the work that we're talking about here, replacement of the units, the H&V units, those are mostly inside the building. It's really the exhaust fans that are up on the roof. And I don't think that that would be a major impact to the roof. So I don't think you necessarily have to sequence it that way in this case. If you were doing a lot of rooftop unit work, you're absolutely right. You would have to do it that way. But I think we're really just talking about exhaust fans. And even if you had to replace a fan, you just get a transition curb from the old curb and put a new curb on top of that and then put the new fan on top of it. So you're not really impacting the roof.
Okay. Thank you.
Tracy?
So I'm looking in the document, we were asked to declare it an emergency. So I'm wondering what exactly that entails and if some of this is technically supposed to be declared an emergency.
So I can say, based on what I have received from BDS and knowing that school is supposed to be opening in September, the way for the board to move forward and start making the repairs would be to declare it an emergency. You do not have, if the estimates that were provided to us are accurate and what was provided, and again, I will send that to you. If it's $2 million, that is a capital project, no matter how you look at it. For me, for the district to move forward, that would be the way to do it. If you choose not to, that's your decision.
Right, but what does it mean logistic wise? What would that entail, declaring it an emergency? If we did it full 2.5 or even less?
So logistically, that means if it is declared an emergency by the board, kind of like when we had the water main break, the board declared it an emergency, which meant we could move forward and make the repairs and fix what needed to be fixed, and then submit our plans and specs. We would be working with the architect, but we would submit our plans and specs after. Right now, if you do not declare it an emergency, you will have to draw up plans and specs, submit to state ed, go through the whole building process. I guess based on COVID and based on the email that I received and knowing that we want to open schools, I would view that as an emergency to provide the ventilation that the state is recommending and requiring.
I got it. Thank you. Just one final question. Do we still have to submit stuff if we just do the repairs?
Well, again, it depends on how much you're going to spend in repairs. Because once you start repairing something, if all of a sudden they go up and they try, and again, I'm not an architect, I'm not a HVAC person, but if they go up on the roof and open up and start doing something with one of those rooftop the rooftop units, and they can't repair it and they have to replace it, you can't just automatically as a board spend $200,000 or $300,000 to replace something without state ed approval. Kind of, and again, it's kind of like the when we had the water main break. We went through that, and yes, we were able to not have to go out for formal bidding and not have to do all of that, but we still went and submitted everything to the state. It's a matter of the process that you go by to do it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mary, I have a question. So right now, whether it's the 2.5 million or something else, what line item or what part of our budget is this coming out of?
I sent that in my email. You have funds, if all of the funds are needed, you have funds that were set aside from a prior year that was earmarked specifically for a future capital project. There was, I believe, 2.2 million. The remainder would come out of, my recommendation would be to take it out of the current year funds that you have approved by the voters to do capital project work.
So what you said it came from a previous year, what year, the 2.2?
Not 18, let's see, we're in 2021, 19, 20, 18, 19. Last year was 19, 20. We have multiple years open. I get confused sometimes. So we just we're in the process of closing 19, 20. It would have come from the 18, 19 school year.
Okay. 18, 19 school year. And you said the remainder of it, that's what we did this year.
That's in this particular budget, the voters approved roughly $1,331,000 for capital projects. So you would take prior money that's already sitting there waiting for some type of capital project and a portion of the current year funds.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mary.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Seba? Ashley?
I'm not sure if Mrs. Seba would be able to answer this, but as part of that memo, Mary, there was a reference to the cleaning of the ductwork for just under $40,000. I'm trying to understand from an HVAC type perspective. My understanding was it's a one-time cleaning. So I'm trying to understand how effective that would be in mitigating COVID-19, because everywhere else we are doing daily sanitation, right? We're wiping all our surfaces down. So I'm trying to put together how that factors into this equation, because I've heard that COVID-19 doesn't last on objects indefinitely, right? So I'm trying to understand how this all fits into the puzzle.
Okay, so we'll say the $40,000 for the duct cleaning, that's an ongoing maintenance thing that we should do every couple of years, and we're due to have it done. That has nothing to do with what the 2.5 million that we're looking for. That the $40,000 will be done within the current facilities budget. And that's general maintenance.
Okay, so that has nothing to do with COVID-19. That's just general routine maintenance.
That would be general maintenance that you should be doing. Yes.
Okay.
Can I ask a question? I know we went through each building and I took notes on their system and the way that they heat or cool, and you talked about ECP and the education house and the fact that they would need to open windows. And so we're in an environment that has full 4 seasons. So how do we deal with the children in that building or staffing in that building when it's cold? And do we move that? Like, what are we doing? What would you suggest? How would we manage that?
Obviously, opening windows has to be weather permitting. You know, I think that's why it's no longer allowed by code to have natural ventilation that way in a school building. You have to have mechanical tempered fresh air in a school building. But again, those buildings are built to a different code. So it's still allowed. It's allowed to remain. So obviously, if it's 10 degrees outside, you're not going to open the windows 100% and turn the exhaust fans on. Everyone would be freezing cold if you did that. But you do it to whatever extent you can. In the fall shoulder seasons, usually pretty nice days, usually drier out, humidity drops down, and you can open a lot of those windows 100% in order to get fresh air in. During the real cold days, you're going to have to just crack the windows a little bit in order to try and get some fresh air. And that's the best you're going to be able to do.
Now, I just pulled up the ECP, the facilities expense form, which the board received. And year one, if you were to fix the items that were grandfathered in, based on the facilities expense form, it's $575,000. And those are items that are considered BCS items 88.1 and 88.2.
Would HUD and the state contribute any money for the slight renovation of the early childhood program?
They would. Our building aid ratio is 10%.
So they would contribute something toward it.
They would
Yes.
contribute something towards it. Yes.
Okay.
So would there be additional contributions since it's the ECP building? The early
As of right now, no. And again, the 10% that the state will give you, it's not like if they say it's $1 million, they're not going to give you $100,000 this year. They spread it out over the course of years. So you're not going to see, it's not like they're going to write you a check. They're going to spread it out over multiple years and give it to you in the form of building aid.
So thank you, Mary. Mr. Seabutt, so my question then goes back to, I guess, what Dr. Drogic has been asking from the beginning, because is there a mandated minimum amount of air flow or quality that we have to provide? Because if we're saying in the winter we're going to close windows or slightly crack them, how will we know that that meets the minimum, the safety requirement for COVID?
So the answer is that yes, there is a code if you're building a building today. So the state mandates how much fresh air you have to bring in a minimum. The problem is those buildings were built under a different code that did not have any requirement. It didn't have a minimum requirement. And those buildings are allowed to be grandfathered in as pre-existing non-conforming. So that's why the answer varies on the building. The high school, middle school, the answer is 15 CFM per student in a classroom space. That's what the minimum says. But on a building that was built in 1907, it just relies on natural ventilation or operable windows. So that's why I can't really give you a standard answer, one size fits all, because it really depends upon which building we're talking about.
Okay, thank you.
I also wanted to mention that, as Mary mentioned, there are other items in our report that are HVAC and priority one, like in ECP. I'm not recommending anything that has to be done right away, but the item in there in phase one is to provide mechanical ventilation in that building and bring it up to today's code. So that is a recommendation in there. It is in year one, but I didn't put it on my list because it's not something that really has to be done between now and the start of school in order to have you bring in as much fresh air as you can. So that's the way I went about this list, or else the 2.5 million would be a tremendous amount more money. I tried to look at this as what you mandated to do by the state, and that is to fix the systems that you have that were designed to bring in fresh air and make them operational once again.
All right, thank you. Are there any?
Sure.
David?
So then, let's say that that we come back and we say, hey, COVID-19 is still with us. We want to do some of these things. You come back to us after school opening, and by October, we know that we only spent a small portion of this $2.5 million. We can go and plow that back in as part of the same emergency, can we not?
If you say try to repair it, and again, Mr. Falcone is already going through trying to fix items listed. That has been made a priority. If we try to repair something, that's not going to be covered under this 2.5 million. So you would not get any kind of aid on it either. So if we're trying to repair it, and we get to August 31st, or whenever that date may be, and we come back and say, you know what, Mr. Falcone was able to repair $100,000 worth of this stuff, or it cost us $100,000 to repair A, B, C, and D. You're not going to get any aid on that. We will still more than likely come back to you and say, we need X amount of money, because you're not going to be able to repair everything within the budget.
So the idea that by the time it's the dead of winter and I don't want to open the cracks on the ECP building too wide, and I want to do something to improve the air quality anyway, that's not looking real good in terms of our being able to do anything about that in the short run. Is that correct?
Well, I guess the longer you wait to do stuff, the longer it's going to take. So if, let's say, we spend even the next 2 months to try to repair some of these things, which again, Mr. Falcone is doing. But if September or October rolls around and you say, okay, now we want to replace the HVAC units on the roof, and those are kind of costly. We might not be able to do that because of weather. By the time we do everything, all of it takes time.
Okay.
I mean, there's no guarantee, Mr. Warner, that even if the board approves everything, that we're going to be able to get the different equipment in. There's no guarantee, but it's the only way that we can move forward to try to get that in place for the kids and for the faculty.
Okay, fair enough. We'll leave the scope alone. Thank you.
Thank you.
The Mayor, you just made me think of something, and I think Mr. Sieber, you said earlier, there could be a lot of schools handling these things now, because we have this, the governor is talking about, the ventilation system and everything. So could that be an impact that maybe schools are doing very similar projects, possibly at the same time? There may be difficulty getting materials or vendors, things like that as well. Would that have an impact too?
There could be. It's kind of like when everything hit in March and people were trying to find face masks. They were outrageously priced. We couldn't find them. It took months to get things. You might run into the same thing now. I mean, we don't know that.
Certain things are becoming difficult to get now in the construction industry, filtration. is one of them, because everyone is now ordering MERV filters, so they're becoming more and more rare and more difficult to get. So that could happen as far as ordering exhaust fans and other equipment as well. The State Education Department, however, has said that they will expedite a project if it's identified as COVID-19 related. So I think that might help us out a little bit. But you're right, there could be a scarcity of materials once everyone starts to do the same thing that you guys are doing and try and open school back up for September.
Okay, so what are we supposed to be doing? Are we going to vote on this 2.5 million, or are we going to vote for something less? How are we going to go about this?
All right.
Antoine,
Because
Miss Carey, okay.
I've
All
heard
right,
of
Tanya.
so I mean, I think I heard Mr. Siba say that even if we voted for the full 2.5 million, none of this can be done for the beginning of the school year. And I just really, I'm really sorry. I just feel personally that we should kind of maybe move a little more slowly on this. We can definitely start repairing and making it as good as possible, since it can't be done for the beginning.
I will say
Really
I apologize for interrupting. My recommendation is to approve the 2.5 million so we can begin to get started. If you wait to approve even $2 million in October, it's gonna make it even more difficult for us to meet the requirements. We're not saying we're going to spend all 2.5 million. I think waiting is only going to prevent you from meeting the guidelines.
But I understand that there are really no guidelines. There are recommendations. It's not like they're required. That was the beginning of my questions, was what are the actual requirements and how will they be, what is the objective measurement for, like meeting them in terms of air quality? Is there like some amount of air that has to be moved through a classroom per hour or something? I mean, generally those are the sorts of really, I don't get the sense that of course we want the classrooms to be as safe as possible. At the same time, since we can't get them there for the beginning of the school year anyway, I think that we could do what we can for the beginning of the school year in terms of repairs and whatever replacements. I mean, the board can approve extra money at any point during the summer. If it goes above a certain amount that we approved today.
I can't say for sure if the board, let's say the board approves the project or approves us to move forward. I can't 100% say, yes, it will all get done, or no, it will not. I can't say that, and I would never commit that. But it gives us the ability to address the issues. I did forward the email that I received. And again, my recommendation would be to move forward so we can address the ventilation issues.
Harry has his hand up.
Harry.
Thank you. Antoinette, I think we've probably exhausted all of the questions and the answers here. If I may make a suggestion, if we could, do we have an actual resolution in front of us?
We don't have a resolution in front of us. The purpose of this was we were being asked to approve a certain amount of money, and we wanted to speak directly to, the architects at BBS to get an understanding of all the costs. Chase, I don't think you had a resolution on Saturday. Am I correct?
I don't believe we did.
Yeah.
In the essence of time, because we've obviously gotten the professional guidance from BBS, we've gotten the guidance from our people, Mary and Michael, but particularly the financial aspect of it. Perhaps we can propose that we go with the 2.5 million, Those who want to say no to it, say no to it. If it fails, then we'll go with an adjusted one. But I think we're going around in circles here. And since we have the 2.5 million as the professionals' recommendation, I'd like that we vote on that first. And if that passes, great. If not, then we can adjust otherwise.
So are we coming up with a resolution on the spot now? I mean, is that?
I asked Ivy to please create one, and she is working on that right now.
Yes, it's just a little bit hard to concentrate on the language because I'm also trying to take note as to what you're saying. So I need a minute.
No, go ahead.
Ivy, no excuses.
I'm sorry.
Mary, this money is coming. Oh, excuse me. This money is coming from future capital projects.
It is coming from money that we had earmarked for future capital projects, as well as a smaller portion out of funds that the voters already approved for capital projects this year.
Okay, that's the 277757.
Yes.
Okay. So basically, okay. I'm not going to prolong it anymore. I have to agree. We beat it to death. Okay.
I have to beat it a little more. I do want to know the 2.2 million, Mary, will then wipe us out for monies that we had in our hold on, I'm going to quote accurately, the monies that we had assigned to future capital projects. Would that completely wipe out the money that we had there?
Yes, it would. But that does not, if you recall, we sent stuff before. You have multiple pockets of money. So the assigned to future capital projects was specifically from the 18-19 school year.
Okay.
You
okay.
still have funds available in your repair reserve, which would require voter approval or a hearing. I apologize, a hearing. And then you have 19 or the 2021 school year where you have funds still available.
Okay.
Mary, if not the 2.5, what is there a different option?
I guess your other option would be to tell the facilities department to attempt to fix everything within their existing budget, which I will tell you right now they can't. And we will be back here at your next board meeting asking for pretty much the same thing. While I have every bit of faith that Mr. Falcone can repair some of it, which we will do, there are going to be things that he can't repair. And as I mentioned, once you start opening things up, you don't know what you're going to get involved in. It's you open up a wall in your own home, you don't know what's behind that wall. And until you do it, you just don't know.
Okay, I guess let me clarify. I wasn't necessarily saying not just to use their current budgets, but I guess I was thinking of more lines of, if not the 2.5, it's like still coming from that line where the 2.5, or I think you said the 2.3, and the rest is elsewhere. But is there another budget that could get us started on the work? So instead of 2.3, could we say 500,000? So you understand what I'm trying to that I'm asking, Mary?
No, I do. Look, I mean, you can tell right now us to try to make repairs within our existing facilities budget. And of course, we're already trying to do that. And if we exceed, the board already approved an HVAC contractor for the year. So right now we have that individual there, trying to make repairs and trying to get this up to, for lack of better words, COVID guidelines or COVID standards.
Mhm.
We will exceed. We're going to exceed what the board has already authorized. I don't know what that's going to be yet. And maybe he'll be able to fix some of it, but he's not going to be able to fix all of it. And what will end up happening is we'll be back in the same situation in a couple of weeks where Mr. Falcone has exceeded or will exceed what the HVAC contractor has been approved at, and we're still going to need work. So you'll have to increase the HVAC contractor, as well as we will still be looking for additional funds to make the repairs.
Okay, thank you, Mary. Ivy, you're looking, so I'm assuming you are ready.
Oh, what I did was I emailed the draft to Mary because she needs to look at the funding portion of it.
Okay.
All right. All I have to do, Ivy, is look at the funding portion.
And I see that I have a typo in it too, so.
I will tell you,
Just look at the funding portion of it. And also, is this constituting an ordinary contingent expense?
okay, so Ivy, the
I
part
see
of the
the third,
funding,
I see the third one, the third be it resolved has a
Okay.
typo in it, so I'm fixing that.
the funding will come from an area called assigned to future capital projects. The exact dollar amount is $2,222,000.
I have that in there. I just have capital funds, so it needs to say assigned future.
Capital projects, yes. And those funds were set aside from the 18-19 school year. And then the $277,757
Interfund transfer to capital.
from the current year, which the voters already approved.
Okay, so I'm saying that the 2.4 is from assigned to future, from the 2018-19 assigned to future capital projects?
It's not 2.4, it's the 2 million.
It's the 470,000.
No, the,
4.2.
what is assigned?
Oh,
we're
I'm sorry,
asking-
I'm sorry. I looked at the top
Okay,
number.
yeah,
Hold
no,
on.
we're asking.
It's 2.2.
Yep, we're
Yeah.
asking not to exceed 2.5, because again, we never know what's gonna happen, and
Yes, that I have. If you look at the second, be it resolved.
okay, not to exceed 2.5. Available funds are coming
It
from,
could be the 2.2. I corrected that number. From
The-
assigned to capital projects, does it need to designate 2018-19 school year?
designate the 18-19 school year, so we're really clear about where the funds are coming from.
School year. And the interfund to capital is
It's from the,
20.
yep, the
2019.
20, yep, the 2021, which was voter approved.
21. School year. Okay.
Mary, what's the total amount in the 2021 budget for capital improvements?
I believe it is $1,331,000, of
Thank you.
which the board had, one of the things that we had approved was playgrounds. There was one at RJ Bailey, which would partially be offset by the town if we entered into an agreement, but all that kind of went on hold with COVID. There was a playground at Highview, and then there was a playground for our ECP kids at LF Jackson. And Mr. Falcone is working on getting designs and prices for the board to look at.
I just emailed the entire board the resolution.
Thank you, Ivy.
Thank you.
Could you read? Could it be read out loud, please?
Mary. Yes, Mary, the other question that I have, right? Let's say this all is approved and it passes. As we go along, I like continuous update as we go along, spend different portions of this.
Oh, we can give weekly updates if you'd like. That's easy.
Yeah.
We would tell you if it's, and pick any building. And I seem to be stuck on the HVAC, the units on the building, on the rooftop. I would come out and tell you, we have a price from ABC contractor for the rooftop unit. The BCS said it was 100,000. We got it for 80,000, or we had to pay 120,000. No, the board will know that the entire way.
Nice.
And if you'd like, I can actually, since we're all getting really good at Google Docs, I could put that in a Google Doc and share it with everybody. And you could see what's going on at all times when it comes to the.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I think it's whether it's Google Docs or any other vehicle for us to get like ongoing updates as far as the progress of the actual projects, but also the cost that is, happening as well.
It would have to be in Google Sheets because that will total everything. But no, that's easy to set up. Everyone has a Greenberg email address.
Okay. Ivy, I see everybody. Ivy said sent another one.
I know, because I found a typo. My apologies.
I have a question about the possibility to open schools. So, as we've been talking about this a while, I want to get this accurate. So in order to actually open schools in time for September, all of our community and parents, as are all waiting for the governor's orders. But once we have that, to be able to open, the repairs would be appropriate, I guess. Is it the right word? Probably not, but and then if we did the $2.5 million replacements or getting the newer stuff that still may create the issue of the heating and cooling, that would be ready when? Like, is there a targeted amount of time that would delay?
Well, if the board approves this tonight, what will happen is, number one, we will continue working with our HVAC contractor to try to get things up and running. We will work with the architects to design the plans for the different the different components that need to be done. We will start reaching out to, whether it's a state contractor, reaching out to various contractors to get the best price on everything. So we would end up doing 2 or 3 different things at once. The goal is to be able to open up the schools and have the ventilation consistent with what the guidelines are. Again, it could be done by a combination of repairs that can be done within our existing budget, or placing an order. I mean, as I mentioned before, placing an order for certain supplies or equipment, sometimes it could take months to get because everybody else is doing the same thing. But we want to get in line to be able to get it resolved once and for all. And keep in mind, we might be able to fix something temporarily. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to stay working. So we want to be prepared for that if we're able to address some of the items on the list provided, that yes, we get them up, we get them functioning, knowing full well that it's going to take us several months or potentially several months to truly resolve the issue.
So do we get it up and functioning with the replacements?
If we are looking at, I guess some of it was like opening up vents, and I'm not an HVAC person, so I'll look at it from my own household perspective. If I have to get heat restored to my house for 2 weeks, I'm going to do that with whatever I can on my own budget. So you would do that within your own budget. But to replace my furnace, I might need to go to that other source of funds. I would have to go to that other source of funds. Am I making sense? So it's going to be a combination of, because we know that things are going to take a while to get. We know that.
Mary, I have one last question. So for all of these different vendors, we will be going through the bid process for this?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. We don't, by declaring it an emergency, you do not have to. However, I will tell you, we will look at different costs. We will check state contract. We will check to see what other vendors can do. It might not be the official bid process, which can take several weeks, but it will be looking at the state contract who has already done all that work for us. So if we have a vendor who's on state contract, the state has already done that work for us. They've already looked at and put out bids and all that stuff. So we're kind of piggybacking off that. And then there's not to say that you can't, we might have a vendor who is on state contract. And again, it's just a dollar amount. Let's say they said something would cost us $100,000. We might be able to go to a local vendor and say, okay, here's what the state said, the state contract said, can you do it for $90,000 or whatever? And they can do that. So that gives us a negotiating point as well.
Okay. And going through the bid process is it's going to be longer.
The bid process always takes longer because we have to draw up plans and specs, or we have to draw up the bids or the RFPs. We send them out to the attorney to review. Right. And then it's a whole process. It takes longer. So right now, if we're looking at replacing a rooftop unit, we would go to the architect and say, hey, what are the specs? What is it we need? They would tell us what we need, and they would help us find, they would help us. But if you go, okay.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mary. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, no, that's basically what would happen. We would reach out to the architects and say, what is it we need for this rooftop unit? They're going to tell us exactly what we need. We would then reach out and try to get different quotes and use and check different vendors and state contract.
And we do have a policy for supporting and using diverse women and minority businesses as well. Don't we?
I believe so. We do try that. With using a state contract, they also try that as well. And again, it's not, if we put something in a Google file that we can all share.
Yeah.
We could put out, hey, we're going to be looking for a rooftop unit. This is the specs. We can attach that to it. And if you know a vendor, have them, tell us. We'll reach out to them. We always want to get the best price, but we also need to have the work done.
Yeah. I don't personally know any vendors. I do think the Google Doc would work well. I just think that since we won't be going through a formal bid process, I do believe it's really important for the board to get an ongoing update or a list of who has been selected, which companies. So if that can be included in whatever, form that you create, that we know the name of the companies and whoever is doing the work as well.
Yeah, that's very simple for us to do.
Okay, Tracy, and then if we could get going.
I'm wondering how do we get the children safely in the building and then continue to ensure that there's no wasteful spending? I'm really concerned because, we're using taxpayer dollars and it's so important to take care of this stuff, but there is the option to repair it. This is a really difficult decision.
Yeah, Tracy pretty much is saying is to do both. How do we still be fiscally responsible, but also take care of the needs of the health and safety of our students and staff?
Well, again, we are going to attempt to repair,
Yeah,
and we are always fiscally responsible. We might be able to make a repair. However, a repair could be temporary.
yeah,
So as we make repairs, we would work with the architect's office, and it would be a group effort.
yeah.
I mean, we could make a temporary repair, and I'll go back to the water main break. How long did we have a temporary water line? We had a temporary water line for a while until everything else was done. So you can have temporary fixes until the work is truly complete.
Okay. All right, thank you. Dr. Chase, did you want to add anything, share any thoughts?
Yes, I think that it's important to let the community know, because there are people watching and parents, that the priority is health and safety. And while I understand some of the deliberations about the cost, I don't think that you can put a price tag on health and safety, because that is the entire district's first priority. So I hope the board, when they make this consideration, which I'm sure they know, and I'm sure, that's your priority as well, because it's important to underscore to the community, the first priority is the health and safety of all the occupants in our district. That's the priority.
Thank you, Dr. Chase. I think I can speak for the board. We all prioritize the health and safety of our students, all the children, and all of our staff. But again, we just got to make sure we're being fiscally responsible as well. So I appreciate those words. I have the resolution here. I'm going to read it. All right, Ivy, you said to use this one. Okay. Let me see if I can get it bigger somehow. All right. All right, so I'm going to read this. Be it resolved that as recommended by the superintendent of schools, the Board of Education hereby determines that the ventilation systems in the district schools are in need of repair and or replacement in order to be compliant with the state requirements to address COVID-19 related health and safety measures, and that the related costs constitute an ordinary contingent expense, and be it further resolved that the Board of Education hereby authorizes the expenditures excuse me, of funds not to exceed $2.5 million from the following available funds: $2,222,243 from assigned to future capital projects from the 2018-19 school year, and $277,757 from interfund transfer to capital from the 2020-2021 school year to repair and or replace the ventilation systems at district schools, and be it further resolved that the Board of Education hereby authorizes the Assistant Superintendent for Business as needed to advertise for bids for the equipment and public work necessary to repair and or replace the ventilation system at district schools, and be it further resolved that contracts for the repair and or replacement of ventilation systems in district schools may be let by the superintendent of schools or her designee without the requirement of competitive bidding, and be it further resolved that the superintendent of schools administration of the school district, assistant superintendent for business, and as needed, the other central office administrators are hereby authorized and empowered to take all necessary. Okay, I have to pause for a second. Dr. Chase, I'm just curious, when you say all the other central office administrators, who specifically are you referring to?
Michael Falcone would be one.
Okay.
Yeah. Mhm.
All right.
Central Office Administrator.
All right, so Michael Falcone is the other person. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm gonna start that. Be it resolved, further resolved over. So be it further resolved that the superintendent of schools administration of the school district, assistant superintendent for business, and as needed, the other central office administrators are hereby authorized and empowered to take all necessary and appropriate steps to secure the equipment and public work required to repair and or replace ventilation systems in district schools on an expedited basis. All right, Ivy, I read the correct one, I suppose.
Yes.
Okay, can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Wait,
Wait, Tanya's saying something.
Tanya, are you saying poll the board?
Yeah,
I couldn't, I'm trying to read your lips, but I'm not sure.
I'm sorry. I think you can hear me now. Can you poll the board? I mean, can you, yeah.
Ivy, can you poll the board?
Sure. On the resolution, to approve the resolution that Ms. Darden Cintron read, was moved by Mr. Williams, seconded by Mr. Warner. Mr. Warner,
Yes.
Mr. Pineda,
No.
Dr. Dragic,
No,
Mr. Williams,
Yes.
Ms. Mears,
No.
Ms. Carey,
I don't know. I'm thinking. Go ahead and ask somebody else, please.
Ms. Darden Cintron,
Yes.
and Ms. Carey.
Okay, the reason why I would say yes is only because of the children. I don't believe we need this much money if we're not going to be doing the repairs that are outlined on this sheet. If we're only going to be doing a certain amount of fixtures here, that's going to amount to $40,000 that we already have earmarked in the maintenance budget. I'm very concerned about $2.5 million being considered an emergency when we're not going to do the work that needs to be done as outlined on this memo. So I'm just going to have to, now, I think I'm going to say no. Sorry about that, but I just can't.
Okay.
Can I ask a question? Can we make a motion to approve a smaller amount and start to work on those repairs at this point and actually try to get schools open in time for when school is supposed to be opened?
Okay, well, this motion here, Ms. Carey, if I'm correct, Ivy, it was 4-3-4 against.
Correct. The motion did not pass.
All right, so the motion did not pass. Is there? Need another,
Is there a way to motion to have a smaller amount approved and the work actually begin on the systems to actually repair the systems so that we can get the kids into school?
So then the next question is, how do you determine what that smaller amount is?
Yeah, because I asked that a couple of times in the meeting, trying to see if there was a smaller amount.
I did hear Mr. Seba say he thought it could be tens of thousands. What if we approved a smaller amount in the hundreds of thousands to cover and let the work begin sooner than later?
I agreed with you, Madam President, when you asked for $500,000. That was the thought in my head also.
Me too.
I agree with that.
Well, I had asked Mr. Seba, like, I think I wrote it down. I think he said it would be hard for him to like pull out, like, without knowing like what can be fixed, what couldn't be fixed, to pull out a specific, a different amount other than the 2.5.
Well, he keeps saying hundreds of thousands of dollars. So we are giving him hundreds of thousands of dollars. Okay, now, I don't know how much more he is going to need, but right now we are giving him a nice nest egg to work with. And like, I agree with the rest of them. If we need more money, then we will vote for more money.
Correct.
So let's make a decision. What are we going to do?
Yeah, Mary.
Yes.
I mean, you're in the business office. You're in contact with Mr. Falcone. Could it be possible to start with? I don't even want to I just threw my own number out trying to get a sense of what could be doable. You both in the business office. I know you would prefer the 2.5. Is there another amount that we could get started that will pass today, or excuse me, tonight?
Again, as we go through and try to fix things, we don't know what we're going to run into, and you're using different budgets. So if it's a matter of spending $50,000 to replace things and make repairs district-wide, we can absorb that in the current budget. Once you start talking about a couple of $100,000, we do not have that. And that's not to say it's not to say 2.5 million is what we're going to spend. If the board wants to review the list that was sent, if you'd like to prioritize for us, okay. But we're unable, based on the information that we received, from my opinion, based on what the architect sent us, the just under 2.5 million is what we need to do in order to meet the COVID guidelines. However, it may come in less. I do anticipate it coming in less. But again, if the board wants to pick a particular school and say, let's fix, and again, I'm throwing out, let's fix Bailey. Let's do Bailey first. Okay, we'll focus on Bailey. We can look back through that email, and I forwarded everyone the email. We can look back through that and say, okay, we're gonna address Bailey issues first. That's a board decision. my recommendation still stands to address the ventilation issues, allow the district to address the ventilation issues. If you want to go building by building, we can do that. That's perfectly fine. I mean, I would recommend against that. I would say you address your ventilation issues, period. We are not going to unnecessarily spend money that we don't have to spend. And anything that comes in less than that goes right back into the money that it goes right back to the capital projects.
Yeah.
Mary,
Did I have
what
my
is,
hand up?
what is the duct work? What is that?
Excuse me, I'm sorry, Miss Carrie, I didn't hear you.
What is the duct work that's going to be $40,000?
Okay, so the duct work really does not have anything to do with the COVID, what we're talking about. The duct work is going through and cleaning, let's say, the high school, the duct work that exists in the high school, to clean that out so staff and students don't have, there's not the dirt and the dust in the duct work. It's kind of like your own house. It's like your own house. You do preventative maintenance. And since the board asked for things that we wanted to do over the summer, that was one of the things we wanted to do, was preventative maintenance. So that really would not come out of this 2.5 that we're talking about. That will come out of the existing budget.
Okay, thank you. Carrie and then Dr. Chase.
I'll defer to Dr. Chase and then.
Dr. Chase.
Mr. Williams, I think you go ahead. You go. I'll go after you.
All right. So a few things here, folks. I certainly heard everybody express their desire to be kept abreast of each step in the process here. And this is not unprecedented. When we, and David, you might remember this, when we paved all of the roads, and Mrs. Carey might have been on the board at the time too. When we paved the roads on campus, we had the facilities person, and I don't think it was Mike at the time, photograph and upload the product that was made for all of those projects, as well as with the details. So that's something that we have done in the past, and we can do again and I understand certainly with the sensitivity of the amount of money that people would want to have that. The other thing is this, folks, that I want to say. I recall during the process of trying to pass the bond for the to do the work, to do the new school, myself, David, and Lloyd, in response to questions from the community, talked about how we got into the state that we got into. And it was primarily because tight budgets. Back then, there were often budget failures, and we had to prioritize. And basically, we prioritized books over buildings. And I'd do it again if I had to. But the other point that I want to make here is the arguments that I'm hearing here are the same arguments that got us into that position. And don't take it as a criticism, because I understand everybody is well-meaning here. And far be it from me, I'm tight with $1. I don't want to give $1 to anybody without getting something in return. But it's the same arguments, and they're misplaced, in my opinion, with trying to go against what the professionals are saying here. Back when we had the issues that got us in this position, we did have people on staff who made good suggestions, but for whatever reason, my colleagues then would push back against it. And I'm not going to get into anybody's motivations, but I will say this: I recognize that behavior again, and we're headed back towards in a situation that we don't want to be in. So I'd ask that you all reconsider listening to what the professionals have said here today.
You're muted, Antoinette.
I'm sorry,
Antoinette muted.
Terry, Dr. Chase.
Okay, so the resolution has the recommendation of the superintendent on it. And just for clarity purposes, I would be a lot more comfortable that when we talk about the health and safety repairs that are necessary in the buildings, that there's equity among the buildings and that we don't pick and choose which building, we don't pick and choose the projects. I don't have that expertise to make a recommendation to say, I pick this project over that project over that project. At every building, I have children with asthma. At every building, I have staff members with respiratory issues. At every building, I have someone who may have an underlying condition. So I am going to echo the sentiments that were just shared. If we could reconsider, we're happy to answer any clarifying questions, but we come to you humbly saying that we have an emergency and that we would like to, if schools shall open in September, which doesn't give us a lot of time, we'd like to begin that process to make sure that we are in compliance and that we meet the mandates that are required of us so that we can feel comfortable telling the community that we've done all that we could to keep our buildings safe. And I know that you all share that sentiment, and I understand the notion of looking at our costs, but we're more than happy to answer any clarifying question, not to sway you any other way, but just to know that the recommendation does have my title on it. And I don't want to be a hypocrite to the community by saying I want to open the building safely and responsibly, and I'm not doing the talk. I'm not doing the walk. So if there's something that we can answer, if there's anything we can clarify, we're happy to do so. But I do ask that you please reconsider for the betterment of all the children in all the buildings. All of our buildings are in need of repair.
Mary, how much would be done? How much work would be done between now and September 1?
I wish I could tell you that everything would be done, but I can't say that for sure. I mean, we have to get vendors in here. We will try our best to do everything,
I just want you to tell me what you think will be done between now and September 1. I mean, are you going to repair the OTFPT unit? Are you going to replace the gym air and handling unit? I mean, something that will let us know what you're going to be, focusing on. Well, I know everything is done, but what can be done? What do you think should be done?
Well, again, as far as what I think should be done, I'm basing that off of BBS and their recommendation. I will say we will do our best to get everything done, but I don't know what the vendor's availability is, what equipment is available. I unfortunately don't have that. And we won't have that information until the board says, yes, go ahead and, start looking. I do know that Mr. Falcone has already started trying to address the issues with, making repairs within our existing budget. I mean, I would love to be able to tell the board, yes, 100% this will all be done by August 31st, but I can't do that.
Say that. Is Mr. Sheba going to be involved in any of this?
Absolutely. He'll be involved every step of the way, because eventually everything we do, if this 2.5 million, up to 2.5 million is approved, everything that we do will go through the architects and will eventually get submitted to state ed. So it's not just us, doing something. It is the architects are involved, the state education department is involved. We have to meet a variety of different guidelines.
All right, Tanya, I saw your hand.
Yes, I'm sorry. I just wanted to say that I would feel comfortable approving a smaller budget to begin with. And I think that I would leave it up to Mr. Siba to work with Mr. Falcone to do what is necessary for us to open schools safely. All the other work anyway was not going to be done for the opening of the school. And I think that we can move more slowly with more consideration on all of that. And I think especially in light of the other things that we need to do to the buildings, I think that if we're not exactly swimming in dollars, and I think that we just do things properly and with, consideration. So.
All right, Ash, I see you. Go ahead, Ash.
Can I motion that we approve $750,000 to start?
I'll second that.
Second.
Okay, sorry.
I'll second that.
So is that the
Antoinette,
same
you're-
resolution as before, just substituting a total of $750,000? And is that all to come from the 2018-19 school year?
Yeah, Ivy, how should we, there's a motion on the floor, so Ivy, is there other specific things in here that I need to pull out, that we need to say differently or do differently? Because these have specific numbers in.
In terms of the number, you would have to ask Mary O'Neill about that. But the wording of the resolution, it's still an emergency. So you still need that requisite language.
Just need to change the figure?
If you change the figure, or you're saying move forward with repairs, again, you have to tell me specifically what you want us to move forward with. Because from what I see, there is roughly just under $2.5 million worth of stuff that needs to be done. As I mentioned, we will make every effort to try to repair stuff, but the board then, if you are not going to go with the recommendation, the board will have to specifically tell me what it is you would like us to move forward with. You would need to look at the list that was sent to you and say, pick at Highview, we want A done. At Jackson, we would like this done. At whatever building, we don't need to worry about that building. I don't know that without you telling me specifically what you want done. What is your priority? What is your priority? It can't be everything.
I'm a little confused.
Tracy, hold on for 1 second, because if you look at the list, right, that Mary sent us, I believe Bailey itself is $850. So that's why it goes back to, if you give something lower, then how much are we putting towards Bailey? How much will we put towards the different things? Mary, am I correct?
Well, again, I mean, those are estimates. If you all of a sudden say, you know what, we're going to commit to $750,000 and 500,000 can go to Bailey and 200 can go, or 250 can go to Jackson. And I'm only using that as an example.
Yeah.
So what if all of a sudden Bailey comes in substantially higher or substantially lower? You now have prevented us from focusing on the other building that might have come in higher. Again, it's a board decision. You just need to tell us specifically which buildings and what is your priority.
All right, Tracy, I think you had something to say. I'm sorry.
I'm very concerned about the spin that's being put on this issue. I have heard every board member, I'm listening, I'm trying to take notes here. No one has said we're going to pick and choose schools. I don't know if there's confusion, maybe on my part. I heard Mr. Siba very early on say that the long term, hold on, let me find it here in my notes so I can quote him accurately. Of course I can find it now. But I heard him say that the long-term repairs, excuse me, the long-term replacements would be 2.5 million. I heard him say that. And I heard him say that he believes it would come in much lower to repair. So that is what I'm understanding. Perhaps the confusion again is on me. I don't want to, say that someone else is being confused. Maybe I'm misunderstanding, but I'm hearing that repairs are much lower. I believe he said tens of thousands, but I'm hearing Mr. Pineda with making a motion for 750,000, which is hundreds of thousands, not quite a million. And I thought that would be for the short-term repairs. I also heard Mr. Seba say with the 2.5 million replacements that we would not be able to open in September. So my goal is, number one, get them repaired and get the kids safely in the schools in September with safe air quality. And then number two, I don't want to replace the existing systems. Let me tell you why. Because I heard Mr. Seba talk about how certain things were shut off, covered, disconnected, unhooked, or something like that because there was uneven heating. I don't want to completely replace a system that was not properly working with 2.5 million if there's a way to repair it and get the kids safely educated, get the staff safely working, whether we're in a hybrid model, whatever we can do so that people are safely in the schools learning. And then if we, again, as I believe Ms. O'Neill said, need to go to a bond to put the proper type of, I think you called it DD, something digital, so I'm gonna mix up the terminology, but to put the proper ventilation that will be a lot, significantly more than 2.5 million, but will be a lot more money down the road with the long-term plan. So please do not say that as a board member, please do not accuse me of having to pick schools. I have 3 children in 3 different schools. I would not do that. Secondly, it's upsetting because I don't want to spin on how I voted, okay? I care very much for our children. I also care very much for our tax dollars. I don't want to be accused. All of us, I think I heard Mr. Williams say, all of us are making these decisions. We're trying to from a good place here, okay? So I don't understand why maybe I'm being confused with the 750 being repairs, and we don't have to pick and choose. It should be repairs of everything that is on that list. I thought that's what I heard Mr. Seba say.
So Tracy, I was about to ask Mr. Seba if you could clarify what you were saying in regards to what Tracy is referencing.
As I mentioned before, this is a 2-pronged approach. The first phase of this is we need to repair your equipment and try and get it operational again to bring in fresh air so that we can bring the kids back in the building. The second phase of that is that equipment also needs to be potentially replaced, and we'll know more after phase 1. So you can approve a lower dollar amount, but then we might very well be coming back to you and saying, okay, we need more money. Here's now what we discovered. And that very well could happen. So I'm okay either way that the board decides to do it, but we don't need the full 2.5 million to do the repairs. We would need to do the full 2.5 million to do the repairs and then the subsequent replacement.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Seba. I appreciate that. Terry had his hand up and Dr. Chase had her hand up as well.
Actually, I was going to ask Fred to elaborate on his point, and he did. Just let me take it a little step further and ask you this, Fred. And I hate to put you on the spot. I know you're a vendor. I understand the politics of it. But I think in the short time you have engendered a bit of confidence in my colleagues and myself. What is the more, you said you would work either way. Good answer for a vendor. Let me ask you further. What is the most efficient way so that we don't lose time in the event that something happens and now things are exacerbated because of this pandemic? What is the most efficient way to operate?
I think the most efficient way to operate right now, just seeing the discussions that are occurring between the board members, is to go with the lower dollar amount. Let us do the repairs. Let us find out what we find, and then let us come back to the Board of Education with those results. If that requires additional monies from the Board of Education, we will know that at that point. I don't want to pick and choose between the buildings. All of your buildings need work, and we need to open all of your buildings and make all of your kids safe. So, I'm not for that. I'm for repairing these systems. Some of them might not be able to be repaired. They might have to be replaced because they're just too far gone. But if you approve a lower dollar amount, we'll start with that. We'll do what we can. And if something's different, we'll come back to you and let you know.
Thank you, Mr. Seba. Dr. Chase?
Mr. Seba, I have a quick question. If the board does in fact approve a lower amount just to get started with the assessment of the work that needs to be done, am I correct so far? That's what, right? Okay.
Yes.
Is it possible that the longer it takes to approve the full amount, there's a possibility that if there are any supplies and materials needed, may not be available because every district is sort of vying for the same thing at this particular point, and this could actually put us further behind? I'm just asking for clarification.
Yes, that is absolutely a possibility. But again, this is a two-phase project. First phase is repair. The second phase is replacement. So what it would be impacting is the second phase.
Correct. But the second phase could impact the ability to bring children back if in fact the governor does order us to bring children back to some capacity.
Well, I think the first phase would allow you to bring the children back because we want to try and make everything you have work.
Okay.
If we do get to a position where there's a piece of equipment that we cannot repair and it has to be replaced, then you're right. We could be impacted because of, availability of product. I won't know that. We won't know that until we get deeper into this and really find out exactly what's wrong with each and every piece of equipment. Then I'll be able to come back to you and tell you with a lot more clarity as to exactly what needs to be done.
So the last part of my question, and someone may have asked this question already, when you say to get back to see if there's additional work that needs to be done, do you have a timeline by which you will come back? Because we want to make sure that all of our buildings are ready for opening. I think that's the sentiment of the full board. I don't want to speak on their behalf, but that's the sentiment, I think, of everyone, right? Just to know that we're ready if in fact we do are required to bring the children back. Do you have a timeline when you can come back to the board to discuss the second phase?
I would say that we would have to have those types of discussions within the next 3 weeks, because I'm going to have to work with Mr. Falcone. A lot of it's going to depend upon local contractors and his staff taking things apart and letting me know what they find out before I can make that determination. And since we're trying to get schools open by start of school, potentially, I need that information sooner rather than later. So it's going to depend upon how quickly they can give me feedback, let me know what's wrong with the unit, whether that unit can be repaired or whether that unit has to be replaced. Then when I have that information, I can come back and have that discussion with you.
Thank you. David, and then after David, there is a motion on the floor. We need to move on that.
Okay, so this kind of reminds me of when we had no money and we were able to make when we had the two furnace problem at the high school, and we were able to make one furnace work with parts from the other furnace for a while and kept things going for a while until we finally couldn't do it. And I thought it was more efficient to go with the 2.5 million to try and get ahead of the curve a little bit so we don't end up in those situations. But if that's not what the board is willing to do, I'm willing to go for the compromise. That's it.
Thank you, David. So we had a motion and a second. Does anyone want the board to be polled?
To be polled on what, my dear?
On $750,000 for
It's
start.
always good to poll. It's always good to poll the board.
Terry, were you raising your hand for poll or to say something? I'm sorry.
Raising my hand to poll the board.
All right. All right, Ivy. There's been a motion and it has been seconded. So if you could poll the board, please.
On the motion presented by Mr. Pineda, seconded by Ms. Carey, to approve $750,000. Mr. Warner,
Can I pause 1 second? Ivy, hold on for 1 second. I gotta go back. I gotta go back to what Mrs. Seaver, I did have one question because Mary said with that 750, we had to be more specific. Do we have to be more specific, or can we start with the 750 and they can work through that?
I think we don't have to be more specific right now, but once we uncover exactly what needs to be done, then we might, if additional money is not added to that pot.
All right, thank you. I'm sorry, Ivy, continue.
I should have asked this. I apologize. I didn't think of this. What about the remaining language from the previous resolution?
218-19
emergency
only. So the funding amount should be from the 2018-19 funding year only, because we won't use up the entire amount from that.
Okay. With that, Mr. Warner,
Yes.
Mr. Pineda,
Yes.
Mr. Williams,
No.
Ms. Mayers,
Yes.
Dr. Dragic,
Yes.
Ms. Carey,
Yes.
Ms. Darden Cintron.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Okay. Mr. Seaver, thank you.
Can I just say one more thing, Antoinette?
Yes.
I just want to, that everyone know, and maybe the board as well can verify. I mean, if more money is needed, we would just need to have a special meeting, or are there other things that would need to happen?
Special meeting.
So at least 4 of us would need to get together, correct? To have a special meeting and vote to approve more funds if needed.
Yeah, we could have a special meeting to vote to approve more funds.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I would ask that, Mr. Seba, you create a letter to let the board know what it's going to cost to have you start planning and designing whatever it is we need designed, so the board is fully aware of the cost associated.
Okay, I will do that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Okay. Thank you, everybody. I think that was it.
I move that we adjourn the meeting.
I just, there's some chat that's going on. Can Mr. Seba just for maybe a minute and a half, just explain to the community what again is going to happen as a result of this approval of this resolution, just so that there's clarity, because I think there's still a little bit of uncertainty.
Okay. So there were a number of items that I had identified at each of the buildings. I've shown for eventual replacement in the $2.5 million. However, the first step of that is to go in and look at each of those systems, and if possible, to try and make them operational prior to the start of school, so that we start to bring fresh air in the way those buildings were designed. So that is the goal. That's what the $750,000 would be used towards. If we get to the end of that and we need more money, we'll have to come back to the board and explain why we need more money and what we found. But that would be the process that we would follow. Start out by trying to repair things, replace where we could not repair, and then hopefully get it all done in less than 750 and come back to you and say, okay, there was some savings. Now we need to design for replacement of this equipment, because it's not going to last very long under its repaired state. And we're going to need additional money, and then we could have further dialogue at that time.
Thank you, Mr. Seba. I appreciate your time. There was a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Excuse me, I apologize, Ms. Darden Cintron. I will say we are going to have to then, since this will be used as a different funding source, I'm going to need to know that the board is okay with approving different contractors to work, because Mr. Falcone has, let's say, our HVAC contractor,
Mhm.
who the board approved for general stuff. This is something different than what they normally do and will be paid for out of a different area. So is the board willing to approve an additional amount of 500,000 or 750,000 for the?
You lost me. You lost me,
Okay,
David, I'm sorry.
so as an example, and again, I do not have the dollar amount in front of me. So we have a HVAC contractor that, let's say, the board approved for $100,000 not to exceed. I am clearly going to exceed that dollar amount. And if we are attempting to make repairs, if we're attempting to make repairs, which we said we would do, we are working from a different funding source now. These are not, that's not what the board approved originally. Is the board going to approve different dollar amounts for contractors? And again, I don't know what the contractors will be. It might be an HVAC contractor. It might be an electrical contractor. I just don't know that at the right this second. With everything changing, we might need to, you will need, it's not we might, you will need to increase the dollar amount for Mr. Falcone or for the vendors that we currently use.
Coming
So-
from the same funding source, the $750,000 we've already approved.
Yes, coming from the $750,000 that you have just approved, you will need to approve a dollar amount for the different contractors. The issue will be, I do not know what that dollar amount is going to be broken down by contract. You might have the HVAC contractor that we need 500,000 for. We might need 10,000 for BBS. We might need 100,000 for electrical work. I don't know that. So what is the mechanism that's in place for us to do that?
We'll pass this resolutions. I'm sorry, go ahead.
But this is individual contracts now.
Now, come on, guys.
Yeah, so I want to know, okay, so when we had the 2.5 million, it was not individual contracts. Is that what you're saying, Mary?
Well, we have, I can't tell you, when you look at the work that is identified that possibly needs to be done, I can't tell you right now if it's an HVAC contractor, if it's an electrical contract. I can't tell you that. So what mechanism is in place when Mr. Sebas says, okay, roughly it's going to be $500,000 for an HVAC contractor to make these repairs? How am I going to get that approved by the board?
Madam President, I'm gonna have to sign off.
Hold on, Miss Carey. I just want to get a little bit more information. Mr. C, but do you understand what Mary is saying? I think some of us may be feeling what's the difference between when we approved. I know approving the 2.5 million, there's anything goes pretty much. With a lower amount, you do have less dollars than the 2.5. So my question to you is, with it being $750,000, do we have to right now, right here, say this is what you use for this, this is what you use for that? Or do we have the ability, you now know it's $750,000 and you are able to determine what we can use and how we can use it?
I think part of the challenge in that, as Ms. O'Neill stated before, is that we don't know what we're going to find. So majority of the work is going to be HVAC, exhaust fans, replacement of units, repair of units, repair of coils. I don't know if your HVAC contractor that you have on contract can do automatic temperature controls work. There's going to be a fairly substantial amount of that, getting dampers functioning again, making sure all the damper motors are working, all of those types of things. And then the third piece could be electrical, where there might just not be power to fans because the power got cut at some point. So there's just really no way for me to know what the balance between the three of those is at this point. I won't know that until we uncover exactly what's wrong with each individual piece of equipment.
I guess I just wanted to put out there that we will be asking you to approve stuff related to the 750,000.
Ashley, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. What I was going to say is, this isn't the first time we do a project. We've had plenty of instances where we have to get approvals after the fact for specific dollar amounts for specific vendors. I think we should just march forward with the 750, let Mr. Siva and all the appropriate teams get their hands in, let them do the analysis. If we need to divvy it up at some point and we have dollar amounts that Mary can provide, now we know it's 500,000 for the HVAC or whatever it may be, let's cross that bridge at that point. I think what's important right now is let's just get this ball moving because we're running out of time. And I think that, like I said, in the past, we've had plenty of projects where we've approved specific dollar amounts, which really comes down to payment, if I'm not misunderstanding this, once we're in the process. I think we've done the important part, which was acknowledging the 750, approving that. Let's get the ball moving.
Thank you, Ivy. There is a motion on the floor to adjourn this, not Ivy, Ashley. There's a motion on this floor to adjourn this meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Well, good evening, everybody.
Have a good evening.
Have a good
Thank you.
night, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.